Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. It is really nice to be here. I've been watching presentations for the last couple of years, and it's great to be a part of it. So I am going to just share my presentation with you, and hopefully you'll be able to see that. And I can tell you all about Simple AAC. Okay. 1 second, let me just... change to... So this is my first time on doing this presentation, so bear with me just a second while I share my screen. And hopefully, yes, fantastic. Okay, we're ready to go. So I'm going to tell you all about Simple AAC, which are easy to follow strategies and practical ideas for anyone that's supporting early AAC learners, particularly AAC learners using symbol communication. So I'm Daisy Clay, and I've just put my Twitter username on there and a couple of hashtags. It would be great to hear from you over Twitter. I'll be following along later on as I'm watching some of the other presentations. But yeah, do get in touch if you've got any comments on this. Okay. So yeah, a quick introduction all about me. I just want to tell you a bit about my journey, sort of how I've got to be where I am now and what led me to create Simple AAC. So I am a speech and language therapist, and I've been working with people with a range of different speech and language communication difficulties for about 15 years now. And my first experience of working with AAC was actually working in a range of schools with children who were using AAC, and my role was to support them to be successful, and that was really mostly around supporting the people that were working with the child, so the parents, the teachers, the teaching assistants, and really kind of doing what I could do to support them to support that child using AAC. And it was in that job that I first heard someone say, "I'll just go and get the device from the cupboard." So that was really an alarm bell to me, an indication of, well, actually something's not going right here if the device isn't even in the room with the child. They're having to go off and get it. And as that job kind of carried on, I would hear things like people saying how they were really afraid of the device, or they were afraid of how to use the software, or they were just afraid they were going to do the wrong thing, or just afraid that they didn't really know what they were doing. And so that really started my journey to try and make people less afraid. Because if everyone around that child is feeling scared and worrying, they are going to actually become a bit of a barrier to that child's success. What we really want to do with AAC is make sure that everyone feels confident and just willing to give it a go. So that was where I came from. And I now work for Smartbox Assistive Technology. So here are lots of smiling faces. This is actually the building I'm in right now, talking to you from. And as you can see, lots of people working for Smartbox. We've actually got even more people working for us now since this photo was taken. This is one of our UK offices, and we've also got an office over in the US. So for anyone that doesn't know about Smartbox Assistive Technology, I'm just going to tell you a bit about what we do so you've got that background. I now work for Smartbox as the head of content development. So that's where I sit in the company. But we create a range of different solutions for people with disabilities. So we make our own hardware, and we've got a range of different access options within that. So eye gaze, head trackers, switches, we cover the whole range of access. We also create our own AAC software. So we've got Grid 3, which is for Windows, and we've got Grid for iPad. and some more software called Look to Learn and Look to Read. And then we've got our content, which, as I said, I'm head of content development team here at Smartbox. And just some of our AAC vocabularies we've got that you might have heard of. We've got Supercore, Word Power, and Pod, as well as some text AAC. But this presentation today is going to really be focusing on how we support symbol AAC users. So I've focused on those there. Okay. So what is simple AAC? Well, as I was saying, I was really motivated to try and do something that would help people to be less afraid of AAC, because it really doesn't have to be scary. Yes, there is a lot that we can know and there's a lot that we can learn, but really when you're just starting out at the beginning of your journey, it doesn't have to be complicated. There are some really simple things that anyone can do. It doesn't have to be done by a specialist. So, you know, I've been on visits to see AAC users, and there's a bit of a feeling that they have to wait for that expert speech therapist to come and do the intervention, and that's what's going to help the child. When actually, what would really help that child is if everyone who's around them every single day was using strategies to help them learn to use their AAC system. So it's about making it less scary and really empowering people so that everyone feels like they can help the child to learn AAC. So simple AAC, every letter stands for a different strategy of something that anyone can do. And these aren't new ideas, they're not new theories about, you know, new interventions we should be doing. It's more just a way to bring together all of the key ideas from across the world and the field of AAC, and pull those together into something that is easy to understand for anyone. So whether you're a parent, speech therapist who doesn't maybe have a lot of experience with AAC, a teacher, teaching assistant, occupational therapist, physio, anyone that's getting involved can really follow along these strategies. So I am going to take some time now and talk you through each of them. So to start with, the first letter of simple AAC, we have got S. And S stands for show. So this is about pointing to symbols as you talk and model language. So I haven't said already, but all of these strategies apply to low-tech AAC, so paper-based, and high-tech AAC, so electronic. So you can use these with anyone. It doesn't have to be on a device or on an iPad. It might be a communication book or a symbol board. All of these strategies are relevant. So whatever we're introducing, we want to make sure that we are showing that learner how to use what we're giving them to communicate, because they might not know, they might not have seen AAC being used for communication before. So we have to show them by pointing. So we're pointing to symbols as we're talking, and this has lots of different names. So you might have heard of aided language stimulation or modelling or augmented input. And some of those terms can be so scary. If you're new to AAC, which itself sounds quite complicated, augmentative and alternative communication, and then you hear even more terminology, that can be really scary. So I'm just taking that terminology out and just using the word show. There are some differences between those terms in what they mean, but at the very beginning, when you're first starting out, you don't really need to worry about those differences. You can just get started by pointing to symbols as you talk to model language. And you don't need to point to every single word. You can just point to the most important ones. So for a child who is not yet using AAC at the very beginning, you might just want to point to one or two words to get started, to show them how they could be using AAC. And it's important to remember that AAC learners aren't naturally surrounded by their own language. They're learning the language of AAC, symbol language, whereas typically developing children who are learning speech naturally get surrounded by spoken language all of the time. And we need to try and recreate that for our AAC learners. So by modelling and pointing to symbols, we're doing that for them. We are using their language with them. Okay, and this one's really important. I really can't say this enough. You can take your time. It's absolutely fine. You don't have, it's not a race, it's not a rush. Take your time to find the symbols as you're pointing to them. And you can even make mistakes. That's absolutely fine. If you make a mistake and you choose the wrong word, or you can't find the word that you're looking for, that's fine, because by showing the AAC learner that you're making mistakes and that you're having to look for the words, you're telling them it's okay when they do that too. It's absolutely fine. And then finally, doing this, pointing to symbols as we talk with AAC learners, it works. We know that it's an effective intervention for AAC learners, and we've known this for a really long time. So there's lots and lots of research. So for anyone that is doing intervention with AAC learners and you need a bit of evidence, you don't have to look very far to find that. There have been some really nice reviews in the last couple of years that have summarised all of the research into modelling or aided language stimulation. So I've spent quite a bit of time talking about this strategy, but really what I want to say is if you're going to do anything and you're going to remember anything from this whole presentation, then just start with S and show. And there's a really nice video that I wanted to share with you, which you can look up yourself. I show this to people quite a lot because it's a great explanation of aided language stimulation and what that means. So let's just take a couple of minutes to watch this now. Okay, so I just wanted to share that video with you, and you might find this useful to share with other people. It just talks about, it just explains and highlights the importance of us doing that modelling and showing AAC to the AAC learner. Okay. So one thing that I found quite helpful is actually getting the people who are working with the AAC learner to just sit and try and use AAC themselves to communicate, so they get that idea of how important it is to have time for learning and to be shown how to do it, because sometimes we assume that we're just going to put the device down and they'll know what to do, but we really, really need to show. Okay. So let's... Okay, so how much do we need to do this? Well, you might have heard this quote before, but again, this I find really helpful in explaining to people how much we need to do this showing. So the average 18-month-old child has been exposed to 4,380 hours of oral language at a rate of 8 hours a day from birth. So typically developing children hear all of this language all of the time. And a child who has a communication system and has speech and language therapy sessions twice a week for 20 to 30 minutes will get that same level of language exposure in their AAC language in a shocking 84 years. So that quote from Jane Corsten just really highlights that it's not enough to just be going and getting the AAC device out of the cupboard for those 20 to 30 minute sessions a couple of times a week. We need to just be trying to do this throughout the day, every day. So I just wanted to show you an example of a symbol communication board. So this is actually taken from SuperCore, the SuperCore learning grids, but this can be used high-tech on an electronic device or low-tech, or you can use whatever symbol system you're using. But just having a look and thinking, what could I say with these symbols? So I might say teddy bear, just to label a teddy bear, or I might say want teddy bear, or I want teddy bear, or teddy bears on the bed. And like I said before, you don't have to point to every single word. You can start just by pointing to the most important words, but just showing that AAC learner what we're expecting them to do. Okay. So moving on now to I, the second part of simple AAC. So I is for interesting. It's so important that we try and keep things motivating and fun. We know that children learn through play. So we need to just make sure that when we're, we might have our aim, we might really want to teach that child describing words, or we might really want to teach them action words. But we just need to make sure that we're always keeping things motivating and fun, because we all learn more when we're engaged and when we're interested in what's happening. So try to base the activities for learning AAC on something that the learner is interested in. So I really love this example, which was from a Practical AAC blog that I came across a couple of years ago. So in this set of pictures, you can see a little girl with her therapist. And the therapist's goal for this activity was looking at different colour words and looking at body parts. And she came up with this amazing activity of getting the little girl to choose coloured lipsticks and makeup and coloured hairspray and where on the speech therapist's face she was going to put them. And I just thought, how motivating for that little girl to have that activity. I think I'd find that fun. So just trying to think, how can I make this interesting? So this therapist uses the phrase, be the fun. And I think that summarises it really nicely. Just try and be the fun. Okay, the next strategy in simple AAC is M, which stands for months and months. So it's not really a strategy, but it's something that's really important to remember. AAC takes months and months to learn, sometimes years. It's just a recognition of how much time it's going to take. It's not something that can be expected to happen instantly. So we need to just keep modeling. So going back to S, just keep on showing. And it's okay if the learner doesn't use AAC straight away. They might take a really long time. If you think about if you've ever learned a foreign language, then if you think back to maybe you learned another language when you were at school and how often you had those lessons, maybe it was once a week, maybe it was once every couple of weeks. Think about whether or not that's led you to be fluent now. Actually, if you've been having that teaching every single day, it might have been quicker. But the other thing to think about is how confident you would have felt to use that language straight away when you were really just first learning. So I know a little bit of French, but I'm still not very confident with it. So I need months and months to be practicing until I might feel more confident to use that myself. So I've got another quote for you here from Jane Corsten, which again is a really important thing to remember. So from the moment a baby is born, they hear and respond to the spoken word. We bombard them with language for 12 to 18 months of their lives. And in that time, we don't expect them to say a single word. So most children who are learning to talk will say their first words at 12 to 18 months. But we talk to them until they're 6 months. And when that baby isn't talking back, we don't just stop. We carry on talking. We carry on modelling language and showing them spoken language. We need to do exactly the same thing with AAC learners and just keep on modelling. And it could be months and months before that learner feels confident or able to actually use AAC themselves. Okay, now moving on to P, which is for pause. So pausing is about giving learners lots and lots of time to respond. So particularly with AAC learners with complex needs, they might need more time to process what you've said to them. And they might need more time to physically initiate a movement. If they've got physical difficulties, they might just need more time to lift up their hand and press the switch, or to turn their head and look at the screen to select a word. Pausing is also great because it shows the learner that it's their turn. So often with AAC learners, we can find that we're asking them questions, we're saying things to them, and we're always expecting them to respond back. But if we just pause, we're saying to them it's their turn, and actually it's their turn to go first. So yeah, consider the learner's needs and that they might need more time. And a really useful strategy is actually try counting to 10. Some people do find it very hard to take more time and pause. And if you count to 10, it can feel like a really long time. But I've worked with learners where actually they need 10, 20, 30 seconds before they can process what I've said to them and then start their response using their AAC. Pausing is also fantastic because it is such a natural thing to do. You don't need any special training, anyone can do it, and it's just a case of practicing. So pausing is really important. Okay, moving on to L now. L stands for language. So I want you to just have a think about all of the different reasons that you might have used language so far today. So maybe when you got to work or you got to school, all of the language that you used until that point. So you might have asked for what you wanted for breakfast. You might have spoken to someone and asked how their weekend was or how their evening was yesterday. You might be asking other people what they're going to be doing for the rest of the day. I'm going to think more about the different functions of language in a second. So all the different reasons that we use language, we need to think about that with our AAC learners. So we need to make sure that when we're doing that showing, we're showing lots of different types of words. So describing words, action words, people words, not just focusing on the names of things. It's not just about things. So when we teach AAC, it can be, it's really common to start by teaching the child or showing the child how they could ask for something. So we might teach them the symbol for bubbles so that they can ask for bubbles. And that's fine. It can be quite helpful to start with a request, because the child can have a really concrete representation of when they select a word, they see something happen, so they get something back in response. But we also need to think about all of the other types of language, all of the other reasons that we might use language in that activity. So let's have a look at just some of the reasons for using language that we might want to focus on, as well as asking for things. So rejecting, it's so important to teach our AAC learners how they can say they don't want something. Actually, they don't want to do bubbles, or they don't want a biscuit, or they don't want to do maths. So they need to be able to reject things. Asking questions, sharing information, getting someone's attention, telling a story, so looking at more advanced reasons for using language, expressing emotion, answering questions, getting help, protesting, saying when something's wrong. So there are so many reasons that we use language, and we need to make sure that we think about that when we're showing AAC learners how they can use their device. Okay, this next one is E, and it stands for explore. So exploring is about giving learners plenty of time to explore their device and babble. So just selecting different symbols or pointing to different symbols and seeing what happens when they select those. It's really, really important to have this time for exploration. And sometimes I hear people say, oh, well, they're just playing with the device. They're not really using it for communication. And that's fine. It's a really important part of learning to just explore and select different symbols. But it's also a great opportunity for us to respond to that exploration. So if the child selects the word more, we can give them more of something. If they select the word bubbles, we can show them the bubbles. If they select the word up, we can blow the bubbles up. Even if they're just exploring and selecting different symbols that they don't understand yet, if we respond to them, that's going to be the thing that helps them to learn what that word means. Okay, and I just had another anecdote for you here with Explore, which is about a friend of mine who was asking about what I did for work. So I explained that I designed the AAC content, and designed vocabularies, and I showed her one of these vocabularies. And even though she could look at all of the symbols on the screen, and all of the symbols had a written label, so she could read what they were going to say, and I'd explained how the software worked, the first thing that my friend did was to select all of the buttons. She was just wanting to know what would happen, even though I'd told her. It was such a natural response for my friend when I showed her an AAC device and I'd explained what it was. It was still a natural thing for her to do, to just select all of the buttons. So we need to give our AAC learners the time to do that too. Just as an example, to show you a page of symbols where I've taken all of the written labels off, because sometimes I think it's easy to forget how much we rely on those written labels. So I spend a lot of time looking at symbols in my job as content developer. But actually looking at some of these symbols, I have to really think, what does that symbol mean? And, oh, I'm not quite sure what that's going to say if I select it. So we just need to recognize how much we're relying on that. And for a child who's using symbols, they might not be reading the words yet. So this is what they might be confronted with, looking at this and thinking, I don't know what any of those cells are going to do when I point to them or when I select them. So just making sure there's that opportunity for exploration. Okay, so the next part, we're all the way through simple, and now we're on to AAC. So A stands for always available. And this photo here is of a girl called Jess, and she's got her pod book there, but she also uses an electronic communication aid. She uses a grid pad. So she's got her high tech and her low tech, and she's always got one of those things available with her. If they don't have their AAC with them, they can't learn to use it. It seems really obvious to say, but going back to that point I first made when I was going into schools and trying to support children using AAC, as soon as someone said, I'm going to go and get their device, or I'm going to go and get their communication book, my heart just sank, because that meant that up until that point, the child didn't have AAC with them. And if it's not there, they can't learn to use it. I read a piece of research a couple of years ago now that just really stayed with me, that looked at children who use AAC in schools, and it looked at all of the opportunities they had throughout the day when they were at school and when they were at home to communicate, all of the opportunities they were presented with. And it found that on less than half of those opportunities, they had their device or their AAC system with them. So over half the time, they had an opportunity to communicate, but they couldn't because they didn't have their communication system with them. So this, although it seems very kind of simple, actually can be so important, just making sure that the learner's got their AAC available. And it might mean looking across the week and thinking about different situations where they might need different types of AAC. So if they're going swimming, they might not be able to have their AAC device with them or their iPad, but they might be able to have a laminated paper-based communication board with words related to that activity and some core words. And I've seen some really nice examples of this shared on social media of people sticking symbol boards to floats and having that for going swimming and having that for bath time. So that's a really great way to just think, how am I going to make sure that this child has got access to AAC? So electronic or paper-based, just need to make sure that they've got access. Okay, another A now for AAC, and this one stands for add words. This is a strategy that's really useful once that AAC learner has started to select single words or point to single words. And this is about adding words to what they say. So if they say one word, we can repeat it back with another word added. So an example might be, if you've got a learner who's very motivated by, I'll use the example of bubbles again, they're really motivated by that, then we can, and they select that word or point to it, we can then show them how they can use that one word in combination with lots of other words. So we can say more bubbles, big bubbles, open bubbles, bubbles up, bubbles down, little bubbles, big bubbles. Lots and lots of different words that we can use in combination with that word that they're familiar with to show them how they could put two words together. And similarly, once you've got a learner who's using two words together, they might say big bubbles or more bubbles. And you can help them to build on that by adding a third word and showing them want more bubbles, like big bubbles, adding to the two words that they've said. Okay, and finally we're on to C of simple AAC, which is for comment. Okay, quite often we see when an AAC learner has their AAC system particularly when we're just going and trying it out for the first time, that everyone gets quite excited, which is great. But then something I often hear is lots and lots of questions. So the AAC learner is suddenly being asked, oh, where's this word? Where's that? Oh, what's this word? Can you see what that word is? And they're being asked lots and lots of questions, which I remember actually in one of the AAC in the Cloud presentations, I think it was last year, Kate Ahern just saying, why do we do this? Why do we ask them so many questions? They're not on a quiz show. And also, if we're just asking them question after question, we're only really teaching them how to answer questions. And thinking back to L for language, we really need to think about all of the different reasons why someone can use language. It's not just to answer questions. And also, we ask questions that we know the answer to. So we might ask, what colour is it? When we know what the answer is to that. And that can put a lot of pressure on the learner. As soon as we ask them a question we know the answer to, they might recognise that we know the answer as well. And if they don't know, we might not have taught them what to do in that situation. If we haven't taught them how to ask for help, then they might not know how to ask us and for us to tell the answer. So a really nice way to turn this around and reduce the number of questions that we're asking is, instead of asking the question, just say the answer or comment on what is happening. So instead of, if we had some toy cars out, instead of saying, what's this? Expecting the child to say car, we can just hold the car up and comment ourselves, selecting the word car. Or we might comment on what's happening, just to model that language. So if I was pushing the car along, I might say, push car. I'm just commenting on what I'm doing. There's lots of different ways that you can comment. So I might comment on what I'm doing, I might comment on what the child's doing, or just comment on what's happening if we're both watching something else happen. So comment is a really nice way to just flip that around, so we're not asking so many questions, because that isn't really that helpful. Sometimes we need to ask questions, but it's great if those questions can be something we don't know the answer to, like, what do you want to do next? That's a great question to ask, just so long as we've modelled and we've done lots of that showing to show the learner how they can tell us. Okay, so comment is a really nice way, and it brings us right back to show as well. So we can show language through commenting. Okay, so this is simple AAC. I really hope that you found those strategies useful. As I say, they're not new ideas. It's really just based on my clinical experience of other people, the evidence that we've got available from research, and just pulling that all together into one place so that it doesn't feel quite so overwhelming, because I know it can feel really, really overwhelming when you're just getting started and it feels like there's so much to learn. So I really wanted to try and break it down into these different strategies in a way that's easy for anyone to understand. So if you are a teacher or a therapist or a parent and you're wanting to share this with someone else, you might want to just share it one letter at a time. So starting off with show, talking about that, and potentially saying, we're just going to practice doing this one strategy, just going to focus on this for this week, or for the next couple of weeks, or for a month. As you notice in my presentation, I spent a lot of time talking about show, and I said, this is the most important one. If you don't do any of the strategies except for one, just make sure that this is the one that you choose. It's so important. So you can break it down into the individual strategies and just introduce one at a time, and that will keep you going for a long time. But it will cover lots and lots of important ideas of what we can do to help support AAC learners to be successful. So I've put the website address there, thinksmartbox.com/simple AAC, because you can go there and get lots more information about Simple AAC. It actually started out as a series of blog articles, so you can read all of those, but you can also download lots of printable resources. So here we are, free stuff. Everyone loves free stuff. So you can go to our website. There is a Simple AAC booklet, which explains each of the areas of Simple AAC, but also gives you some really practical ideas of how you can get started with each of the strategies. There is also a webinar that I delivered quite a few months ago now that you're welcome to share with anyone else. It's about 20 minutes long, so it summarises all of the different areas of Simple AAC and can be used for training. And there's also a Simple AAC poster. So for anyone that wants to have a big visual representation showing all of the strategies, you can have that stuck up on the wall in the classroom or at home, just a reminder, or in the SLT room. Okay, so there you can go and download all of those resources. And that is the end of my presentation. So thanks for listening. There's actually, yeah, I have got some time left, but hopefully, yeah, you found that really useful. And I'm going to be going over to Slack and having a look at the conversation there. So yeah, do make any comments there. It'd be great to hear feedback. And I will also be sharing these slides in the Slack channel, so everyone can have them there. As I said before, get in contact on Twitter and use the hashtags. And yeah, I look forward to speaking to you. Thank you very much.